Okay.
So, okay, this is being recorded. If anyone has any confidential questions, you can send them to me privately. We can figure that out. So Rabbi Lopatin, please begin. And I guess I will say though, and I'm sure he'll tell us, but Rabbi Lopatin also was for many years a transformative rabbi of our congregation. And so welcome back to Anshe Shalom, a community that you shaped with your family for 18 years. And please tell us what you've been up to and how that led to tonight.
Oh, thank you so much, Rabbi Wolkenfeld, and thank you so much to Sharon Jadell and Miriam and all the Jadells. Wonderful to see the folks on. The background, I'm in a hotel, so there's nothing exciting in the background here. So I put up my JCRC AJC where I work now, even though I have a little tiny shul also, Kilat Etz Chaim, which is wonderful. But I'm looking at Rabbi Wolkenfeld's office and looks so familiar. I love it. Also the file cabinet, many of the people on this call have their files are right in that cabinet. So only good things. I hope you've all paid your dues. So, but it's wonderful. It's so wonderful to be back. And, when I was, I studied, as many of you know, Islamic studies. And so in college and in graduate school, I did look to try to really maybe connect with those outside of my own community, of the Jewish community. It really wasn't until the end of end of my time at Anshe Shalom, really, that I connected more with the African American community in Chicago with Pastor Chris Harris, and I know that Rabbi Wolkenfeld and other rabbis, certainly Rabbi Siegel, have established very close relationships with him and with others. And then when I left and was at Yeshivat Chovei Torah in New York, some relations, but really that was mainly focused on the Jewish community and the Orthodox community. So it was really when I came to Detroit that I was blessed to join a group of, looking at him right now, Reverend Flowers, a group of pastors and rabbis and lay leaders that had been working, and some professionals that had been working together, Blacks and Jews, and it's been just incredible. So I'm like only here less than 2 years at the JCRC AJC, which sort of came with the gift of having a coalition for Black and Jewish unity. And so Reverend Flowers is really my teacher. He's my brother, my friend, but very much my teacher in this really incredible journey of learning from the African American community, being sensitized and partnering, and Reverend Flowers, you'll talk, you'll throughout this evening, I hope we learned sort of it's been an amazing learning curve and such a rewarding experience. So it was in me, my kishkas, we did work for all sorts of, for Darfur, we did work outside of our community when I was at Anshe Shalom, but it really wasn't until I came to Detroit and was able to come into this kind of very deep contact and found it to be so powerful and rewarding. So that's sort of my journey, sort of the deep down desire to connect, and then finding it finally in the wonderful friends and mentors that I found in Detroit, in both the Jewish community that was doing it, or people, and the people like Reverend Flowers. So I'll turn over to Reverend Flowers to do his introduction, and then I'm sure we'll have more questions, and push me also, with other questions so I can open up even more.
Well, thank you, my dear friend and my brother. I call Asher my brother from another mother. And so I thank and praise God for Asha. We are definitely true friends. And I also want to thank you, Rabbi Wolkenfeld, for allowing me to be here. Where do I begin? Over 40 years ago, I believe over 40 years ago, I was a freshman at Morehouse College, where I met Coretta Scott King in 1979. And Coretta Scott King adopted me as one of her spiritual sons. And she poured into me and took me under her wing to teach me, to guide me, to show me what she could. And I patterned my life after Dr. King in terms of being a fighter for justice and freedom and equality. And so I never shall forget in 1979 when I met Mrs. King at the King Center. We were talking about a program to break ground for the King Center. And one of the things that Mrs. King mentioned was Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And she talked about the fact that she said, Kenny, she called me Kenny as her son. She said, Kenny, always include the Jewish people in whatever you're doing. She said, because when we were in the struggle, she said, they were always there for Martin and for me. And she talked about Abraham Joshua Heschel. She talked about how close he and Dr. King were. And she made it a point. Every program that we participated in at the King Center, she always had a rabbi to participate in the programs. Interfaith programs, other programs, there's always a rabbi there. So that was where I kind of got my first stuff in 1979. After going off to Morehouse, I went to Israel. My first trip to Israel was 1984. I've been to Israel now 9 different times. 9 times I've been to Israel. My first trip was 1984. And so when I got back from Israel, I began to further embrace the Jewish people, to further embrace Israel. And so I moved to Los Angeles in 1987. And in LA, they had a Black Jewish Clergy Alliance. So immediately I became a part of that because of my roots from Mrs. King. And I was a part of the Black Jewish Clergy Alliance. We got involved in doing all kinds of programs together. And the church I was pastoring, Messiah Baptist Church out there, we connected with Temple Israel of Hollywood, Rabbi John Rosoff. I believe he just retired, Rabbi John Rosoff of Temple Israel of Hollywood. Even prior to that, I neglected to mention, 1987, I met Rabbi Chaim Seidler-Feller, who was in charge of Hillel at UCLA. I worked at UCLA for 2 years, from 87 to 89. And Rabbi Chaim Seidler-Feller, we became very, very close friends. So I've always been involved in Black Jewish relations. Moved back here to Detroit in 1995, 26 years ago. And I said, I'm just going to relax and just pastor, not get involved in community stuff. I'm not going to get involved with the NAACP. I'm not going to get involved. And the Jewish folk in LA contacted the Jewish folk in West Bloomfield and said, we have Reverend Kenneth Flowers coming to Detroit. He's a friend of Israel, a friend of the Jewish community. Embrace him, welcome him. And so they embraced me. I went to Temple Bethel October of 1995, and I preached there. The first Black preacher to preach at Temple Bethel, Michigan's oldest synagogue, established in 1850, and the rest is history. So I found out the Lord said, you can run, but you can't hide. I ordained you to work with the Jewish people and to do what you can. So since then, I've been to Israel, as I stated, a total of 9 different times. I worked with AIPAC. Matter of fact, Asher's brother-in-law, Jeff Mendelson, very, very close friend of mine. We met in 2007, I believe it was, 2006. 2006 we met, and then we established putting together a trip to Israel. And January 15th, 2018, we're in Israel. And I was honored by His Excellency, President Shimon Peres. I spoke at the official residence of the President's Home of Israel, and I was presented the first ever Martin Luther King Jr. Israel Award by the President himself, President Shimon Peres. And I was honored. I was in tears and everything that Israel's elder statesman would be there to present this award to me. I served on AIPAC's National Council. I've lobbied Congress in support of Israel. I've stood by the Jewish people on so many fronts. I spoke at the Holocaust Memorial Center in Farmington Hills against Ahmadinejad with Iran. I've come out against BDS. I spoke in Seattle against the BDS movement. I have been involved in a lot of pro-Israel movement programs, anti-Semitic programs where I've tried to speak out against anyone that was anti-Semitic. I've also spoke, believe it or not, at the Abraham Joshua Heschel School. So I was really honored to, when Mrs. King talked about Abraham Joshua Heschel, I was invited to speak at the Abraham Joshua Heschel School, January of 2007, for the King celebration there. And it was an awesome experience, and the students went wild. I felt like a rock star. I had never in my life spoken where I was swarmed after a speech. They just swarmed me. And the students begged me to stay and come to their classes. So I stayed and went to 2 of the classes. It was just a great time. I spoke at Congregation B'nai Jeshurun there in New York. And it's just been a great, great time. And so here in Detroit, I've been involved with JCRC, Metro Detroit. One trip we did back in 2002, we went to Africa and Israel, sponsored by JCRC. We did the Goree Island and Dakar, Senegal to see the slave house. And then from there went to Israel, and it was a joint trip with Black pastors and rabbis to learn about our history together. And it's just been a wonderful time. I could go on and on and on, but I know that the time is far spent. So I'd rather just have you ask questions or whatever. I am a Morehouse man, so I've graduated from Morehouse College with the Colgate Rochester Divinity School, got my master's there, have spoken all around the world. I was spoken in Cape Town, South Africa in 2019, spoke in Johannesburg in 1993. I was the first African-American to speak at the World Trade Center in Johannesburg in 1993, before apartheid officially came down. I had a chance to meet Nelson Mandela in 1990. I've been to the White House several times under Presidents Clinton and President Obama. God has blessed me to speak in Rome, Italy at a global conference there, to speak in London, England, to speak in Oxford, England, to go to Paris. So God has blessed me. So I could go on and on, but I just thank God for being here and having my friend Asher to invite me to be a part of his former spiritual home. That means so much to me. And I did speak at a synagogue in Chicago. I can't recall the name of it now, but I spoke there years ago. My friend, the late Reverend Tyrone Kreider, who was very active in Chicago with the Rainbow Push Coalition, he did a program, and he and I both spoke at a synagogue in Chicago in honor of Dr. King. And the name of the synagogue escapes me now, but I'll stop there and we can have dialogue.
Thank you. Reverend Flowers, you've definitely spoken at more synagogues than I've spoken at, so I'm very impressed. And you should definitely add this one to your list. So let us know when you're next able to travel to Chicago. I want to invite people here to, everyone participating, to add any questions in the chat. We'll try to use that as a way to have a conversation. And so please do so. I mean, we've all, you know, on how Zoom works, I hope, right? So use the chat, please, to add as your questions, and in that way we'll, you know, and please, you know, ask whatever it is. If it's, you know, we can't promise to answer everyone.
And let me jump in while they're getting the questions together. Let me just say this, that Asher and I have bonded tremendously, as I stated, through his brother-in-law, Jeff Mendelson, but since he has been the co-convener for the Coalition for Black and Jewish Unity, we've had to talk about tough issues, issues dealing with race, issues dealing with anti-Semitism. We've dealt with issues dealing with the George Floyd murder, police brutality. We've talked about Israel, we've talked about Palestinians, we've talked about Hamas, we've talked about a whole lot of stuff. And but that's what pushes each of us, where I can understand more from the Jewish perspective, he can understand more from the Black perspective, and we grow together.
And we push ourselves, like you're saying, and I wonder if Reverend Flowers, you could talk about like early on, not so early, but let's say in a year and a half, just over a year ago, after the terrible George Floyd murder, there was a really interesting discussion we had about racism, about attacking racism,
Yeah.
attacking anti-Semitism, having each other's backs. And it was, maybe we should talk about that. Like there was, when Reverend Flowers, you were very strongly said, now is a time we need you to talk about, we need Jews to talk
Yes.
about racism and fighting
Yes.
racism. And
Yeah, it was,
touch on
there was we were having a discussion about racism and anti-Semitism, well, actually racism. And someone from our Jewish perspective, Jewish friends, mentioned about anti-Semitism. And I think what Rabbi is referring to is, I made a statement, I said, we will continue to fight anti-Semitism any chance we get. I have a track record going back 30 years, 40 years. Right. I said, but right now, we need to deal with racism and police brutality against Black folk in America. And I think I made a statement. I said, can we just have a moment? Can we just have a moment right now where all of our energy and all the energy is going towards this situation, because so many Black folk have been shot down, killed, choked, whatever, by police down through the years, which we've known through the years. Now it's becoming popular, not popular, it's becoming exposed due to cell phone videos and everything. So my statement was, let us focus on what just happened. We don't want to diminish George Floyd's death by tacking on something else. Let's focus on this right now, and then we will deal with the Jewish, with the anti-Semitism. Because when the synagogue was attacked in Pittsburgh, I was one of the first ones to contact my brothers and sisters. We condemn that. We stand with our Jewish brothers and sisters, even with the situation of the young man that just got attacked and beat in New York. We made a statement that we need to come out against that right away. So the whole point was, we are our brother's keepers, but let's not be so gung-ho and tacking on this that we forget about what just happened. A man's life was just killed right there in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
And it's, I just want to say that when we need to come out with a statement for Israel, so I asked, actually, I really wanted that to come from the Black side of our group. So I asked Reverend Flowers to write something, and he's taking a lot of flack because it was kind of too pro-Israel, or it was too, focusing on attacking Hamas. It was an amazing statement. I have to say, Reverend Flowers, and if anyone is blessed to have correspondence with Reverend Flowers, he's an incredible user of emojis and of capitals and exclamation marks. And I think I dare say that the statement was reprinted in the Detroit Jewish News.
Oh, was it?
But I'm scared to have you look at it, because I think they gutted some of your capitals, and so
I would like to get a copy. Still send me a copy of it.
Absolutely. So, but it is interesting, and I'll Rabbi, welcome. I'll just ask this. I see it in that Ruth has asked it. Wonderful member Ruth Lippman, leader of our synagogue. The description of how do you respond to the description of Israel as an apartheid state? And maybe like the nuance, I mean, you love Israel, it's incredible. Not just the Holy Land and the state of Israel, but you're also, I know that when the group went to Israel, there were issues with how Israel responds to issues of Eritreans and Sudanese. And so, not everything is perfect in Israel, but how do you respond to this idea that Israel as an apartheid state?
Well, I guess for me, I don't see it as an apartheid state, because I recognize that there are many Black militants. There are those who on the far left who may look to Israel, and they look at it not so much from the historical significance of the Israeli people or the Jewish people, but I think they look to it in the context of the Jewish people who came from Europe. So they see it as the colonizers, the colonial people who come from Europe there to Israel, without recognizing Israel's rich history of being there thousands of years. And living side by side with many of the Arabs at the same time. And so I think what happens is that you have people in America, especially many African American people, who look to what happened in South Africa, what happened here in America in terms of slavery. Black folk in America, we're the only group of people in America that's ever been enslaved on American soil by this government. I mean, it was legal to enslave us. And so I think you have people who come from that background, from those roots, when they see people who had homes that they were living in, Arabs living in homes prior to 1948. And then when the European Jews came in, and maybe some of them got moved out, many people can't understand, well, how is that legal? Why is that the case? That because we know how the Native Americans got moved out, or how Blacks, even we're looking at the situation now, the 100th anniversary of Greenwood over in Oklahoma, the 100th anniversary of the massacre of Black Wall Street, and how what happened in Wall Street, Black Wall Street, did not just happen there, but happened all around the country. That you have a history from the 1800s up into the 1900s of Black communities, thriving Black communities that were run out, that were destroyed by whites here in America. And so as a result of that, that causes this backlash where you have many people saying, okay, if we see what's happening to us now, the way it looks in Israel, from their perspective, having not been to Israel, they look at it, oh, these folks came in from Israel, they moved the Palestinians out, just like they did that. So we're going to be against, they are it's an apartheid state. They don't have the full understanding of the nuances with the Palestinians, with the Arabs, with the Israelis, things of that nature. And I think that's why so much teaching has to be done. So I try to teach Black folk that Israel is not an apartheid state. I try to explain to them as much as I can, but then I do get pushback from some of my brothers and sisters, like, you don't understand. They are the oppressor. And I think part of it goes to the fact that when I was in Israel in 1996, my tour guide blew me away. He was an archaeologist, and I said something about him being Jewish, and he shocked me and said, "I'm not Jewish." I said, "What do you mean you're not Jewish?" He said, "I'm Israeli." And he drew a distinction and stated to me, he said, "I'm not a religious Jew. I don't go to the synagogue. I only go because my wife tells me to go for bar mitzvahs or for the holy days." He said, "But I don't classify myself as Jewish. I classify myself as Israeli." And he said, "There's a difference." So I think when he said that to me, it just blew me away. And then I began to understand why certain Black folk look to Israel as an apartheid state, because they look to it not as the Jewish people per se, but as Israelis, that these are Israelis who claim not to be Jewish, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. So we have questions are coming in really, in large numbers. To me privately, some to the group. I want to, I guess, maybe circle back and maybe ask I want to, like, what, let's talk about the Black Lives Matter movement, and which is like so prominent in like contemporary civil rights movement, and I guess how should we feel, both from each of your perspectives, what does it mean for Jews to ally ourselves with, not just with issues of racial justice, not just with contemporary civil rights, but specifically with Black Lives Matter, because of what they do or what they don't say about Israel, what they do or don't say about Jews? Is there space for us in that movement? And I guess I'd love to hear from both of you on that question. Is there space for Jews in that movement? How do we show? And I guess the other, like, less abstract version of that, like, how do this Jewish community here that I live in a very white neighborhood of Chicago, how do we show our solidarity? How do we show our support for Black neighbors who are our neighbors in Chicago, but maybe a few miles away in some directions, not our neighbors?
One of the things that I'll jump in first is I look at it as two different entities. You have Black Lives Matter, the organization, and then you have Black Lives Matter, the movement. Black Lives Matter, the organization, which started after Ferguson with Mike Brown's death, maybe even a little before that. In there, I never joined that group, never supported that group, partly because of their condemnation for Israel, calling for the destruction of Israel. So I never participated in Black Lives Matter, the organization. However, with the death of George Floyd, and the deaths of Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and I could go on and on and on. There was a movement afoot to show not that the organization needs to be lifted up, but that the movement needs to be lifted up, that Black Lives Matter. And we have to let people know that when we say Black Lives Matter, we're not saying Black lives only matter. We're saying Black Lives Matter too, or Black Lives Matter also. Because if you look at statistics, you'll discover much more police brutality against African Americans than against white Americans. You look at police can stop a white person, be very courteous to them, very nice, and then yet stop a Black person, and it's totally different. And so we have to have that talk with our children, how to act when you are stopped by the police or anything, and that our lives do matter. And if our lives did not matter, we would not have had what happened 100 years ago in Tulsa. We would not have had what happened in Rosewood. We would not have had what happened in St. Louis or in New York or in Detroit. So we have to let people know that as Black people, our lives do matter. The Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, Paragraph 3 says Negro slaves shall be considered 3/5 of all the persons. So even to the founders, our lives did not matter. We were only considered 3/5. So I take the position not of the organization Black Lives Matter, but in terms of the overall movement that as a Black man in America, Black lives, we matter. We must support Black people in America, and not just Black Lives Matter, but Jewish lives matter, other lives matter. But right now, Black folk are being oppressed. We're being beat down by police. We're being shot down, even economically. We're still 3/5 per person. Economically speaking, the Black median family income is still about 3/5 that of the white median family income. And that just shows that our lot economically, politically, socially, we still are at the bottom. And when you have a systemic system, a systemic racism, economic part that have systemically wiped out Black folk, wiped out Black wealth, wiped out our income and our ability to make money, then it causes all of these people to say, when will people listen?
Oh, 1 second. I think
You just mute yourself. You just mute yourself. Hold on. There you go. There you
Can
go.
you hear me now?
Now we can. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think I had a call that came in or something like
Okay.
that. So anyway, so from my perspective, we have to draw a distinction between Black Lives Matter, the organization, which calls for the end of Israel, to supporting Black Lives Matter, the movement, the overall movement of supporting Black people and oppressed people here in America.
Thank you. Thank you. Rabbi Lopatin, how was that? How have you been able to navigate that? Because that's a hard message sometimes to share in the Jewish community.
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, I guess I see three different answers. One of them is like on a very personal level, getting to know Reverend Flowers and hearing how my Black friends, how painful it is for them to hear all lives matter. And and really that, a lot of it is sensitizing ourselves. I find with many, even in the Jewish realm, many halachic authorities, when they're sensitized to something, then they give a different Jewish legal halachic ruling. So likewise, when I really saw, because I got to know Reverend Flowers and some of the other reverends, pastors that we work with, and really that this is something that it was important for the Black community and for my Black friends to hear Black Lives Matter. So that takes it to a very different level. It's not just a political slogan. It's not just, where I'm going, it's really, this is a very personal, and so that's why it's important for them to hear the Jewish community say that. The second thing is, I think it's very important to take back some things. Like, I think, when I hear free Palestine or something, I say, yeah, free Palestine from Hamas, free Palestine from PA corruption, so really taking back. So likewise, Black Lives Matter. And I wrote an article in the Jewish Week, and I didn't get that much flack. I didn't get flack for it, that I feel Zionism and Black Lives Matter are liberation movements and liberation ideas. And Zionism is caring for the Jewish people, that we have rights, and we have rights to a homeland. The Jewish people have rights to a homeland, just like the Black people, Black folks have rights that have not been met and that we need to fight for. So rather than running away from Black Lives Matter, I want to embrace it and say, as a Zionist, I'm embracing it. And I'll just say that I find, I see Stacy sent something, there is a distinction between the movement for Black Lives, which had the platform, not Black Lives Matter. But unfortunately, we see a lot of the leaders, and just in this recent conflict in Israel, that the official Black Lives Matter, I don't know, Twitter account or Facebook account came out against Israel, basically. So but that, again, that's Reverend Flowers talked about the organization. But on the other level, I feel that we have to, that when I've spoken in Reverend Flowers Church, and when all my relationships with different Black churches and Black communities within the community, within the Black, it's been so warm and loving. And with my kippah, with being there, maybe it's something about Detroit that's really just there's a warmth in Detroit that exists. But I found myself very, very comfortable in the Black community, in a community that maybe at some point some of them will go to a Farrakhan rally and will listen to Farrakhan. At the same time, I find them very loving and supporting when I'm there. So, so it's an interesting thing. So it's something that I feel in my kishkas and deep inside me, I can embrace, and it's meaningful for me. I'll just say one thing, and that is, I think we're stronger as the Jewish people, having these feelings for the Black community and being supportive of the Black community. And I think, there's a little bit of a downside that, when you say Black Lives Matter, the movement for Black lives, that, is it harming Israel and all that? But I think the benefits of really being friends with, and being there for the Black community are much more outweigh than any of the risks of someone misunderstanding of why we're supporting Black Lives Matter.
Let me also jump in and say another thing also. When we had Susan Heschel, Abraham Joshua Heschel's daughter, to speak to our group, she made a comment that blew me away, and I should remember this. I told her, I said that I was talking to one of my Jewish friends, and I talked about Black Lives Matter. And he made a statement. He said, all lives matter. And she said to me, she said, Reverend, she said, next time one of your Jewish friends say all lives matter, when you say Black Lives Matter, she say, then quote me and tell them that during World War II, I forgot how many millions of people died. She said, but when it comes to the Holocaust, we only talk about the 6 million Jews. She said, we don't talk about all the others who died, because that's not important to us. We only talk about the 6 million Jews that died. She said, so what about the others? She said, so when you're saying Black Lives Matter, you're saying we matter, we're important, just like we say the 6 million Jews died were important. She said, so you can quote me on that. I said, okay, all right.
Let me ask about, you mentioned, Reverend Flowers, the tensions or the fraught nature of the Black community's relationship with police forces, and with and as being one central concern of the Black Lives Matter movement. The Jewish community, by and large, has a very positive relationship with our local police force. Our synagogue, we hire off-duty police officers to provide extra security. Most Jewish schools and community institutions partner very extensively with local police forces. So it's interesting. It's an area of our lives where we feel for our safety, we have to have a deeper relationship with our police forces, and right now that is an issue. That's a major issue facing the Black community, to kind of feel respected and protected by local police forces. I'm just curious, either of you have any advice on how we can be good allies for each other when both of us feel threatened and are moving in different directions as a result of feeling those threats?
Well, one thing about I make it unequivocally clear, I do not support the, what they say, defund the police, because when something happens, I'm calling the police, regardless what they have done. If someone breaks in my house, I'm calling the police. If someone attacks me, I'm calling the police. And I would pray later that they don't attack me when they get here. But we need the police. We have to call the police. So I think that the thing is that what is happening, police overall are good in the context that they protect, they serve. However, if you look at the history of when police were founded, the whole police movement was started as slave catchers. They were organized to stop or to catch runaway slaves and bring them back. And for too long, many police departments have that same mentality that if a black person, if I'm dealing with black people, they're still a slave here in America. And what we're discovering now is so many police officers tell lies when it comes to their police reports. George Floyd, prime example. They said, oh, we got there, he had a little medical situation and died on the way to the hospital. The guy, Ronald Green out in Louisiana, they said that he died in a car accident, only to find out 2 years later with the police body cam, he was beat, taser, drugged. I mean, and we could go on. Breonna Taylor, police lied and said, oh, we didn't break down the door. There was no one hurt. She was killed. So what we're discovering is that when it comes to black people, many police officers, not all, but many, feel the need to do whatever they want to do because they feel wearing the badge gives them the authority. They can do whatever they want to do. And then they can lie about it because there have not been any consequences for their actions. And so they feel I'm above the law. I can say what I want, do what I want when it comes to black people. That has to stop. We need police, but we need police. I was living in Los Angeles back in 1991 when Rodney King was beaten by the police on videotape. I was a commissioner with the Civil Service Commission of Los Angeles. So my commission had to recommend a candidate to the police commission of LA after that. I was there in 1991 when he was beat. I was there in 1992 when those 4 white officers were acquitted and Los Angeles would have been flames. I was living there. And it devastated us that these individuals could beat this man and you said on videotape, and they're acquitted. And yet I've had white friends tell me, even some Jewish friends tell me, oh, I talk to the police any kind of way. I'll tell you, if they stop me, I'll tell you, what do you do? And they will go off. If we get stopped by the police, even me as a pastor, I have to make sure my hands are on the wheel. I got to make sure I'm making these sudden moves just because of the color of my skin. I've seen it happen too many times. So we have to have the police to police our communities. But in LA, we had the Warren Christopher Commission, and we started talking about community policing, where the police live in the community, where the police had a relationship with the community. And I think that worked in LA, and it works here in Detroit, where in Detroit, we didn't have a lot of problems last year in terms of the demonstrations here, because in Detroit, the Detroit police had a better relationship with the citizens of Detroit. So we didn't have a lot of the violence that happened in other cities around the country.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. There has to be that trust. Look, I understand that there's all discussions, statistically what's going on, and but I do know I take this as the tragedies that occurred and the horrors, travesties that occurred as far as violence against Black people by the police. We know that there's all sorts of violence, but I take it as a learning moment. And I would say one thing that, I tried to read the book, White Fragility. It was very difficult. But I hear from so many Black friends and so many, Reverend Flowers is a community leader. And for him to say that when he is stopped by the police, Reverend Flowers has to have his, hands on the wheel. And there was a reverend that was talking, a pastor that talked about, he was stopped by a Black police officer and who talk to him, talk down to him. And
Yeah.
I mean, look, I am the reverend, I'm the pastor who buried so many, I do the funerals for so many of your friends in the police, you know, and so it's a time when hearing these stories over and over again, when you do realize there is such a thing as white privilege. Now, I'm grateful for every gift that God gives me. And if there is the gift that I can be stopped by the police and not have that experience, I mean, that's a thank God. But I have to say to myself, unbelievable. Can you believe the different attitude and how different it is to be an African American in America today? So I take so many of these things as learning moments, as sensitizing moments. And I do think that, you know, Reverend Flowers talked about like the early origins of policing and how to police. And there are discussions, again, not defund the police and not even move resources away. The police need more resources, but a new way of policing that is not about controlling, not about being in control and overpowering and putting the person down that you encounter, but a new way of, and as Reverend Flowers talked about, community policing, because it did feel in Detroit that there was a much closer connection between the Chief Craig, the chief of police, and the pastors. And while there were some issues, there was also a very good connection, a good relationship. So
there was just an interview also, Rabbi, the other day, well, maybe a few months ago, of a black man who had a white friend, a white female. They worked together. You may have seen it, where they both got stopped by the police, and she had she talked about how she was so nervous and frantic. And the officer, oh, just take your time, honey, take your time. And she went back and then she said she thought about if she were black, would they have told her, take your time or whatever. And then they had the black guy who had gotten stopped by the police, same all in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he talked about how he was glad his friend, who was white, did not have to go through what he went through. He said, but he said, it kind of angered me, the fact that because of the color of her skin, she got all this preferential treatment. But when I got stopped, they pulled guns on me. And he said, then come to find out, they had the wrong person. And it goes back to what Rabbi stated about this thing called white privilege. And I tell people all along, white privilege and racism are two different things. Racism is when you intentionally oppress a group of people because of the color of their skin, and you have the power to do so, to keep them down. That's called systemic racism. But white privilege means that different things happen to you, not because you wanted to happen, just because of the color of your skin, just because you're white. Just like that woman was white, she didn't have to be treated, but because she was white, that officer treated her differently than the black man who was stopped also. And I say to my Jewish brothers and sisters, for my white Jewish brothers and sisters who are European or American Jews, unless someone knows you're Jewish, you can always hide behind your skin. I cannot hide behind my skin because they look at me, he's black. So those are the things, and you didn't pick what color you were. I didn't pick what color I am. But here in America, there's something called white privilege that says because of the color of your skin, we will treat you differently than the way we treat black folk or Native Americans or Latinos or Asians. We will treat you differently. And that's why all these black communities were plundered back in the 1800s, 1900s in terms of Black Wall Street, Rosewood, Greenwood, things of that nature.
So let me ask, what's the field in which we can work together other than issuing every time something bad happens, we can show up and issue statements, which is important, right? You want to have people show up and offer solidarity when you're hurting. But are there projects we can collaborate on together? Can we build something together, our two communities? And what are some areas where you feel that can be most productive?
One of the things that we did at Temple Bethel, my church, Greater New Mount Moriah, and Temple Bethel, we were partners from 1995 up to present, and we did joint seders together. We called them gospel seders. So my choir would come over, sing gospel music, and the rabbi and I would recall the Exodus story. It was a great time of fellowship. They came to worship with us for our worship experience. We did pulpit exchanges where I would preach at Temple Bethel. The rabbi would come preach at Greater New Mount Moriah. And he found out it's easy to preach here because people talk back to me. They give me claps. They say, amen, amen. And then when I go preach at the synagogue, they're like, why can't our rabbi preach like that? We would come to shul every week and everything. So we do things like that. We would go to different outings together, fellowships together, projects, go see movies together, do different things together to get to fellowship, to get to understand each other. Because I think if people get to fellowship and break bread together and learn about each other, you get to know each other. You can establish that friendship, that brotherhood, that sisterhood, that camaraderie. And then when issues arise, you may not always agree. We're not going to agree on everything. But just as husbands and wives disagree and remain married, for the most part, Blacks and Jews can disagree on different things and remain brothers and sisters as well.
Yeah, and I think that message of enriching each other and learning from each other is so powerful. And Sharon, you're blessed to have an African-American daughter, Miriam, and there is just a culture that, we have a Bible study group that actually I know Chicago has also, and just being inspired. We talked about with Reverend Flowers, we learned the part of Daniel and Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being thrown into the fiery furnace, and their faith kept them alive. And just to be inspired by that, a faith that many Christians have, but is, for me, the incredible amount of suffering and oppression that the Black people have gone through over the centuries, and to still have faith in God is incredibly powerful. So, I really feel that. Oh, yeah. Okay. Hey, hi, Mara. Just to have that learning experience and to work on projects. I know that Marvin Tick mentioned some things. Frankly, voting rights is very important in the Black community. It's important in the Jewish community also to make sure our voice is heard. And so we had an interesting discussion about the Muslim Uyghurs and should our Coalition for Black and Jewish Unity take a position on that? And I know it keeps going back and forth, but I think we have said, yes, that's an issue that's important. Jewish people are reminded of concentration camps and forced labor and genocide. And that's an important point for us to collaborate on. I think what I would say is I think our communities, the Black community, the Jewish community, when we come together, we are a very potent force. And in our relationships with politicians, also with the governor, lieutenant governor. And so I think that we actually, even the city of Detroit, our federation is working with the city of Detroit to help Black churches and even perhaps some Jewish institutions with some funding and some loans. I think we're a potent force when we come together. So I don't want to say it's a utilitarian relationship, but our love for each other, our learning for each other really gives us, we benefit so much from it. We really grow from it.
Yeah.
But I do want to say that, if I gave a sermon sometimes, because Reverend Flowers, when we did the Bible study, I actually heard your sermon and I loved it. But I know in shul, Rabbi Wolken, I'll tell you, if I gave a sermon, they say, there's no stop. Why isn't he quoting Rashi? Why isn't he quoting this one? Why isn't he quoting that one? All he's saying are these things, so they don't always, there'd be people kvetching, even if we gave an incredible sermon. But I think the overwhelming people would be delighted. But I always think about that. What would people say if I gave a sermon like Reverend Flowers gave? Where is this source? Where's that source?
And in the Black church tradition, I mean, we have Black preachers who can quote various sources, and I can quote different sources. But in the Black church tradition, traditionally, If you mention Jesus, you're done. You mention Jesus, we have hugs. They start shouting, dancing, praising God. And so you learn how to, I'll never shall forget when I was at Morehouse and when I was in seminary, that my professors of preaching taught us that while you do all the research and get all of the background that you can get on the particular text, when you deliver it, you make sure that even a kindergartner or maybe one of those sisters or brothers who never had the chance to go to school because they were picking cotton, because they're out there working the field, you make sure that they can understand what you're saying. So they taught us that while you may have all the research that a PhD can understand, make sure that Aunt Jane and Mama Suki can also understand, and Big Mama, that they can understand as well.
That's a great lesson. That is a great lesson. That line alone, that's worth thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Our time is nearly up, but there's so many topics left to discuss. I guess I want to kind of ask your advice on how we might continue to explore this relationship if you want to be involved in the work you're doing, and also some advice on how we can continue this process here in Chicago, what resources there are, what steps we can take to move this partnership along.
Well, if you know Black churches or Black organizations in Chicago, definitely partner with them. If there's a ministers alliance that you can partner with, if there's a Black church near your synagogue, you can partner with. If there's a NAACP Detroit chapter, Chicago chapter, or Urban League chapter, if there are some groups there, I don't know about Rainbow Push if you work with them or different things, but find different groups that you can work with. And I think the key thing is getting involved, getting to know one another, because we'll discover that we have far more in common than we have apart. For Black people, for the Black church tradition, we use the Hebrew Exodus story as our point of departure. And we believe that just as God delivered the Hebrews from Egyptian bondage, just as he used Moses, we believe he used Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Dr. King, he used others to deliver us as well. And so we believe that that's why we can maintain our hope, that in the midst of it all, God is still with us. And we believe that if God could deliver Daniel, he could deliver us. If God could deliver Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he could deliver us. If God could deliver Paul and Silas, he could deliver us. If God could deliver the people from Israel, from Egyptian bondage, Babylonian captivity, God can and God would. So we have a strong faith and a lot of hope that in the midst of all what we're going through, we still believe that the God we serve has all power. We still believe that God has the power to cause us to rise up and move forward. I still have hope. And I believe the Lord will make a way somehow. I don't want to preach tonight, but I feel like preaching right about now. Hey, I feel like preaching right now.
Amen. Speak.
Amen. Thank you.
It's such a delight. You know, we're, I don't know, 7,000 miles apart. I don't know how many miles apart Israel is from Detroit, and Chicago. You know, and I just would back up what Reverend Flowers said to connect. You know, some of the best connections are when we have fun parties. We have a holiday party that we brought together African Americans and Jews, and just celebrating together. Yeah, look, it's not easy because we live in our own community, in our neighborhoods. Look, even at Kiddush, after davening, you hang out with your friends a lot of times, you know, when we're, God willing, we'll have Kiddush again. So, you know, it's hard to break out, but it is so rewarding. And then you find that, yes, these are my friends also. These are people. How could I have lived without them? How could I have lived without, you know, being with Reverend Flowers and his compatriots? So making that effort to institutionally connecting people, I saw it was mentioned the youth, you know, in high school levels. We actually had a day of racial unity, a racial healing, where we brought 8th graders together from the day schools to a school downtown, to the Paul Robeson School, Malcolm X Paul Robeson Academy. And it was amazing. It was really, there's incredible connections that are made that are exciting for kids and exciting for people. So I was, you know, follow that suggestion that Reverend Flowers said and find ways of going out and actually meeting people. And I guess, Rabbi Wolkenfeld, as you're asking, we need our institutions to help make that happen. Because me as an individual, I don't know, I can just go. Today, I was in some Arab towns today in Kfar Qasim, and I want, and even in Lod, which is 30% Arab, I wanted to go and schmooze with the people on the street and the kids and say, hi, how are you? It's hard to do that, but the institutions like synagogues can really help, and churches can help bring us together. And it doesn't have to be going to services, it just can be on a social level, but there is a power of learning from each other and from each other's faith and passions.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you both so much. Thank you everyone who's joined. This event was recorded. It will be on our synagogue YouTube channel, so you can share with friends who weren't able to join us tonight and spread the message. I'm leaving tonight with a lot of hope and a lot of gratitude for your friendship, and that you've shared some of the insights of your friendship with all of us, and especially those in our shul community, our synagogue community. Let's keep this conversation going. Let's think about ways we can build from this energy and implement some of these ideas here in our own neighborhoods. And
I look forward to coming to Chicago now that the pandemic is dying down somewhat, and I'm fully vaccinated now. I look forward to coming to Chicago, and where we can meet face to face, and maybe even preaching there one Friday night. I look forward to that.
I would love to welcome you to the synagogue and show you around the neighborhood. So let us know when that's possible, when you're in town.
Okay, great.
Always welcome at Anshe Shalom, and please send our love to everyone you meet in Israel. And thank you.
Thank you. We miss Anshe Shalom. What an incredible place and incredible years ahead of it. So lots of success. Thank you so much, Rabbi. And thank you to Sharon again for sponsoring this. Really.
Thank you, Sharon.
What a treat.
So much. All right. Good night, everyone. And
good night. Good night. Shalom. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Take care. Bye-bye.